Good afternoon. We are getting ready to start our noon show, Business as Usual, which is our daily interactive web call with our special guest, Justin McElhattan, President, Industrial Scientific.
Hi, Audrey.
Good morning. So this is our fifth interactive session, I believe, or our sixth. And the weeks are just going by so fast. So I'm Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. And I am joined today by my co-host and our Vice President of Visibility, Jonathan Kirsting. You may know us from Tech Vibe Radio. So today we are excited to be joined by Justin McElhattan, as I mentioned before, President of Industrial Scientific. But a few things about the call. So first, it would not be possible without strong support of our good friends at Huntington Bank, who stepped up to sponsor the series. If you don't know about Huntington, they're actually the largest SBA lender here in southwestern Pennsylvania. There are some great things about to happen in Congress relative to the SBA loans, and organizations such as Huntington are going to be in the front lines helping to process applications. So a little bit about the technology and our format for today's call. Most of you notice that we have actually muted your microphones. I would ask that you keep your microphones on mute throughout this entire call. Some of us have a lot of background noise going on around us, and we want to ensure that everyone can hear our speaker clearly. So with that said, we want this call to be interactive. So you'll note at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat box. And you can have questions, you can write questions in, and we will do what we can to try to answer those questions. Just put your name and company and we'll try to get to those questions. If not, we're actually archiving and recording today, so we will get back to those questions as best as we can later in the week. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome our guest, Justin McElhattan. So I'm gonna sort of set the stage for a minute. And Justin, Industrial Scientific has a strong vision about the one that is particularly relevant today. And so can you start out by sharing that vision and then roll into a short overview about Industrial Scientific from a product and service point of view? And welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your hectic day.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Audrey. And Jonathan, Brian, Audrey, Tech Council, and Huntington Bank, thanks for doing this series. I think right now, the value of a team like the Tech Council is really being shown through the unite the community, share best practices, and do things that really help businesses do what they need to do in these really challenging times. So yeah, back to the vision of Industrial Scientific, just to give you a little bit of insight. We have a vision statement as a business. We've been around for about 35 years and have been driving towards this for many of those 35 years. We say we're dedicating our careers to eliminating death on the job by 2050. And if you paint with broad strokes here, there are about 1 million people killed in workplace accidents each year globally. And there's about 2 million people killed through workplace illnesses or exposures, more chronic issues globally as well. So we have kind of taken that on and said that we want to end that. There's way too many times that people get a phone call that a loved one at work is not coming home. And so that's the vision that we're driving toward. We're very serious about it. We are involved in after action reviews of fatalities and illnesses. And when you start driving on kind of the 5 whys, asking the 5 whys, you find that these events are so often predictable and therefore preventable retroactively. And so we're pushing on things that we think can help end that, help people get home safe and healthy from work each day. And so when you look at what Industrial Scientific does, we started in the North American coal mining industry doing gas detection, monitoring explosive gases, oxygen, and toxic gases, and kind of grew up as a really hardcore high-tech instrumentation manufacturer. we launched a platform. We started development of a platform in 1999 called iNet and launched it in 2002. It's basically a connected device platform that is monitoring instruments around the world, and from those devices we get insight into the environment people are working in, where people are they in a healthy state, are they upright and moving or not, and other things. So we've been doing that for close to 20 years. So we're addressing a good chunk of that vision by monitoring people in the workplace and monitoring the environments that they're working in. Last year, we recognized though that that's not at all going to enable us to achieve our vision over time. We need to go much broader than that. And so we've been working to extend our reach. Last year, we bought a company called Intelex, headquartered in Toronto. Intelex is the world's leading environmental health and safety software platform. And so when you look at the kind of things that Intelex does, from an emissions standpoint, monitoring greenhouse gas emissions, doing EPA reporting, over to the health and safety side of it, doing risk assessments, job safety analyses, things like that, observations, incident management. We're able to address a much broader area of ensuring safe and healthy workplaces around the world. So that's a little bit about what Industrial Scientific does. We have about 1,200 employees. 2/3 of those would be based on the gas detection side, and about 400 of those would be tied to the Intelex business. The company.
And so you're still making things today as a manufacturer that safety is really in your DNA. You can probably, hopefully, share quite a bit with other people who are on the call, other essential manufacturers, about how to maintain continuity of operations while remaining laser focused on exactly what you just articulated in terms of safety for employees and for your customers. Can you talk about the changes that you've made or some of the things that you could share with us that might be helpful for others to understand?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, and I think every company in the world is dealing with this at some different pace. I checked my email right before we got on the call here and realized that this is the 7th week now that Industrial Scientific has been dealing with COVID-19. It's actually 2 weeks before that, so our 9th week of dealing with COVID-19 response. We have about 200 employees in China. China is a big market for us. We manufacture in China. Many of the goods that we make in China are used for the Chinese market, but we also have a couple of sub-assemblies that we bring to Pittsburgh and incorporate into products that are shipped into other markets. But we have, we've had to manage the safe restart of a sizable manufacturing operation in China going back 7 weeks. And so we've kind of followed this around the world and seeing how that's going. So this is not a last couple of weeks kind of thing for us. This is a last couple of months kind of thing. And we've had the benefit of seeing some practices put in place in China across a number of operations that are part of Fortive, which is Industrial Scientific's parent company, that have been very helpful to us. It's really important to note that so many products and services and software platforms that many of you on the call deliver that are deemed essential really are essential. If you look at, for example, the gas detection equipment that Industrial Scientific manufactures here in Pittsburgh out on the Parkway West next to Vestro, you'll see, these are used to ensure that people are getting fresh water, that we are generating and transmitting electricity to keep hospitals powered. If we are not able to provide those goods and services, and the same for many of you on this call, we have Thunderdome. Things start to unravel pretty quickly. So we feel a very high sense of urgency to ensure that we're taking steps that allow us to continue manufacturing products and continuing to serve customers. And those span a lot of areas, from physical distancing. I'm trying not to use the word social distancing because I don't think we need more social distancing. We need basic physical distancing. There's been a lot of chat about that on the web. But in our manufacturing operations, just looking at things like how have we redesigned work cells to enable isolation of people and teams? how we continue to allow, how do you serve lunch to people through this operation? How do you stagger schedules to make sure that you have safety and health being accounted for? We've closed down large areas of our building. We have about close to 300 or close to 200,000 square feet with One Life Way, our headquarters and manufacturing site here in Pittsburgh. We've closed off large swaths of that building to enable our cleaning teams to focus efforts on specific areas so that we can clean it, a quarter of the building 4 times or 5 times as often. And so that has been, so there's been a lot of work that's gone on to enable us to continue manufacturing.
So what, we did run into each other, you and I ran into each other. We were both traveling to different places in Toronto. So your operation there has been playing an important role in helping airlines and the cruise industry to assess risk. How about talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is, it was great to see on the single flight, the Air Canada flight that we have up into Toronto, but the business in Canada, again, is called Intelex, and we're doing it. There's a lot of work that's being done through Intelex to help the COVID-19 response. You cited a couple of examples. We have a lot of airlines that are customers of ours, and looking at things like passenger lists and manifests, and helping do risk assessments around that. Intelex is the software platform that's used by much of the cruise industry, and we were involved with the Diamond Princess cruise line and the safe repatriation of the passengers that were stranded off of Japan. We're seeing the bulletin capability where people are announcing changes in work schedule, announcing changes in cleaning, tips, prevention tips, document control, incident management. We're just seeing so much of that software platform being repurposed to have an effective response to COVID. One of the things that for me was so exciting was to see that part of the bulletin feature that we have can be used for employee recognition, and we've seen that being used, just a huge spike in thanking the members of the healthcare community around, making sure that they're being recognized for their efforts. But it's our teams, our services teams, implementation teams, consulting teams at Intelex are doing just a tremendous job to make sure that we're waging this fight in a way that's really effective.
So was
Justin,
that a specific pivot that occurred like 9 weeks?
No. We are oftentimes what we call system of record for environmental health and safety data.
Okay.
Within our customers. This is an enterprise software platform, and so you typically have the emergency response groups that are using this. One of the reasons we like the company so much and ultimately acquired it was around the flexibility of the platform to configure things. And so what we'll see is customers are using an occupational health module and then simply extending that over into COVID response. They're using, for safety tips, they're using bulletins, and now they're extending that over into COVID. So the only pivot that we've done is that we've made 4 modules available to municipalities. We're starting off in Toronto and proving that we can get this stood up quickly. But we started work with a pilot municipality last week, region of Poole up in Ontario. And so many of these municipalities it's really hard for them to buy SaaS systems. It's not part of their typical procurement process. They struggle with that. And so we're making those modules free to them and helping them establish some good standard work around emergency response in this area.
So given then the escalation of that use, are you adding people to your team right now?
Yeah, we are hiring. We've put 12 positions on an accelerated. So these are primarily services positions on an accelerated hiring path. We brought 2 people on last week, virtually onboarded them, which has been interesting to see how that's going. It's actually going very well. And I think that that's important to mention. I have been amazed these last couple of weeks working virtually how effective, at least I feel, and that goes for much of the team as well. You know, we've had a center of gravity around most of our companies that is centered on working in an office. And I think this lasting change coming out of COVID is that center of gravity is going to shift, and we're going to cut some of those ties that tie us to offices. I spent so much of my life in transit and on planes, I just am shocked by how much time I'm able to get back and how productive I'm able to be in a day. So things like onboard employees is, we're seeing that be able to be pretty effective too.
So Justin, I'm really curious with having this new way of working right now. What's it like you being a leader and having to navigate this? Obviously, you've been through some pretty big changes over the years of your leadership. Has this been one of the more trying times in your leadership position?
I would say that it is. This feels, I said this in our business, there's a lot of people in business today that have not, we've had such an economic expansion for over a decade that I don't think many people I work with have never seen anything other than pure economic expansion. And for those people in the tech industry, this is like, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to grow 20% a year. So I think there's just a recalibration around what an economic cycle is. And looking to contribute. I wouldn't say this time this is going to sound odd. I'm not saying it's not challenging, but this is more like just get to work, right? This feels like kind of the work we did around 9/11, the work in the global financial crisis. You're driven and energized by dramatic needs of your customers in the business to the point that you don't have time to be tired or even reflect on that. And that's how this last couple of months is felt. A couple of things that I've pushed into the business that we've thought about is a business is that this could be how we work for the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, we've put a lot of emphasis around long-term business continuity. One of the quotes that another leader in the business had said was that, we can't be feeling like we're preparing for a quarantined storm. This is a quarantined winter, and reframing our brains around, okay, we're going to run the business for the next half year, next 2, 3, 4 quarters like this. How do you do that? Mm-hmm. And so, we have a structure. I'm sure many of your businesses out there have a similar structure. We have an employee communications team. Every day we review the news. We review local inputs on any legislation or recommendations that have come out, because we have employees in about 22 countries around the world and 15 facilities of size that we really need to be worried about. So we review that from an employee comm standpoint. Secondly, we have an emergency response that looks at every facility. We're accounting for how many employees do we have who are under quarantine, how many employees do we have who are sick, who've been diagnosed positive, just kind of daily steps to ensure that the facilities and the employees are taken care of. And then we have these long-term business continuity teams. They meet every day. There's one for industrial scientific, and there's one for intellect, so centered on the business. We've broken down every function in the business, from leads to product development, to accounts receivable, to payroll, and have established daily metrics that we are tracking across the business. Mm-hmm. We meet every day. The call typically takes about 30 minutes, and we review everything, and we have targets. We have to continue to make progress from an innovation standpoint, from a product development standpoint. We can't just kind of push pause on the business. And so, we're still working this out. We're only 3 weeks into this, but this daily long-term business continuity process, I think, is what has me saying that I feel really good about the path we're on to ensure that we're keeping momentum moving forward. So that's been incredibly helpful to us. And be happy to help anybody that's, that's been one of the things that's made the difference here recently.
So we have a question here. With some of the safety masks and other safety equipment that you manufacture, any of your products applicable to the healthcare industry?
Not directly. We don't make N95 masks. We don't make power air purifying respirators, those kind of things. The equipment that we manufacture and that people are using is kind of one step removed from that. We're making instrumentation and monitoring, wearable sensing that the people who are keeping those places powered or keeping water supply to them are using. So, we have looked at ways that we can contribute to very directly. We're seeing ways that we contribute very directly, more on the software side than on the hardware side. But to be very honest, I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to keep the core of industrial scientific operating in a strong way without disruption. And, so kind of in that respect, I feel like that's enough for right now. So we're working on that really hard.
So what about, can you share any experiences that you've had? I mean, you're across so many different countries and you've seen this sort of migration of COVID, as you said, for like at least 9 weeks. Is there anything that you can share with people about what you're seeing and
yeah,
about it?
So I'll give you two maybe narratives here, two stories. The first is at our plant in China. We have a bunch of folks who go in and work, and the physical distancing, masks, different commute, things like that have really become kind of standard. And in a way, I'm sure there's the denial, the anger, whatever curves we go through emotionally in a time like this. In conversations with them and calls like this that I have with the China team, we're seeing them adapting to a new normal in a way that I think is pretty healthy.
So what is that? What does the new normal look like for your team in China?
It means working in a pretty empty area, using the full size of the facility, working in staggered shifts, staggering lunches and not having a whole lot of social interaction at lunch.
Wow.
Working with a bunch of people who wear masks to work, washing your hands 20 times a day, lots of adjustments that enable distancing to happen. It's not sitting at a table with your friends at lunch and talking. It's a little more of a solitary life amidst other people doing work in a solitary way. But I think people are finding a way to fill those holes that we need to fill socially as people.
And so China supposedly being ahead of the curve in terms of what's happening around the world, sort of any of the attitudes that you're seeing that maybe you can share, because they're at the beginning where they experienced this a lot earlier on than we did. And the reports sometimes from the news aren't necessarily filled with, some deep accuracy.
Yeah, and from what we've seen in the conversations we've had, people they're resolute. They are they're dealing with it in a positive way. I'm sure that I'm not seeing the full. I'm sure there's people who are struggling in a very deep way with this. But the performance of our operation is measured by quality, on-time delivery, sustained performance. Even commercial functions, our sales team, we have sales offices across the country. We're seeing some pickup, and I think everybody's questioning, what is this going to look like? Is it going to look like emerging from this? Is it going to be an L, like a lazy L? Is it going to be a U, an extended U? Is it going to be a smaller V? I don't know, but we have seen some solid demand coming recently out of Asia, out of China, in a way that's pretty promising. Those could be minor blips, and this could also be cycle 1 of 3 that we see.
Right.
where we go into kind of a code red for a while and then emerge a bit and then go back into a code red and emerge. And this may be a year of that. But so my first is just what I know talking to our people and hearing from customers in China. The second, I had a note from our head of sales for Asia Pacific who lives in Singapore. And he had such a nice note. He said that it was he had a Sunday with his family, and he said it actually began to feel normal again. And I think, this was maybe a week ago. I think this was last Sunday, a week ago Sunday. But people were out, shopping malls had reopened. And now this is a country that has the ability to clamp down very fast and is not massively geographically in the way the U.S. is. But so he was giving encouragement to the U.S. folks to say, hey, there are endings to these times, and to try to be helpful from that respect. But we just stay tuned.
So, before we wrap up, what have you learned yourself about being a leader? I mean, you're in software, you're in manufacturing, and you're across many different countries, and you have been on the road for as long as I've known you.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned about yourself, and what's changed, and what advice might you want to share?
I'm curious how I would answer that in 6 months, but what I feel like my duty right now as a leader of a business, it gets down to, there's times in your life where you take a 5-year horizon and you look 5 years, and that's what your job is. I think as a leader right now, I feel like my job is a couple of very simple things. It is to ensure the safety and health of our people, right? It's to have a very high standard, and to make sure that leadership across the board is aligned around that. For one, which is necessary in any sized organization, because there's going to be people who downplay this. There's going to be people who are panicked by this, and it's important to set the tone of what we are going to get done and how we're going to do it. So that's number one. Number two, I feel like it's important for me as a leader to be genuinely helpful in answering the how are we going to do that, and that's sometimes involved in you're rolling up your sleeves and let's really work to establish how we get our work done. Mm-hmm. So, and third, why are we doing this? Why is it important that we keep this plant operational? What are the consequences if we let our customers down? You're going to have those of you running manufacturing companies where people are going in, your people's partners are going to be asking them, why are you going to work? And you have to pass the test on, you have to provide unquestionable clarity to those people who are going into an operation with others when everybody else is being told to stay home. And then, so those are some of the very basic things. And you asked, what have I learned? I've learned that I've got about half of the leadership team of the company telling me they've never felt so connected despite not being,
wow.
In the room. And I just think that when you put the rigor around daily communication and having, using video, that's been really important.
Well, I have one last question here.
Yeah.
To our time. How long did it actually take in China, in Shanghai, for you to shut down and then resume work under the conditions that you described?
We were shut down for 2 weeks. And part of that was the Chinese New Year. We had New Year, which every year is, we are shut down anyways for a week. And we planned going into that with inventory and everything else. But we had to stay closed. I think it was an additional week or 9 days following that. We performed multiple deep cleanings on the buildings and had kind of a staging process for teams coming back in. But basically, we were down for a couple of weeks, probably 15 days.
Okay, and then you moved to the staggered.
Yeah, we started. Part of it was driven by the fact that there were travel bans. We have employees from Wuhan. We had an employee who lost an uncle to the virus in Wuhan, and that was so we had folks that could not get back to. We're based in Pudong, in Shanghai. We had people who just simply could not get back to the town to work, and so every day we track percentage. So we started with about 40% kind of capacity day one, and we were able to ramp up and make sure that people were safely able to get back in to the building.
And so that most
One more
people,
question.
okay, go on, Jonathan.
Just curious. I thought it was a really good one here. Maybe as we wrap this up, is Justin, any daily messages you give to your employees for like inspiration to keep them motivated?
I just want them to know what contribution they're making for our customers. I mean, that's it. We're keeping people that every day we have the opportunity to keep people alive. We don't need any, might need a little bit more right now, but we're incredibly honored to serve people and help them go home alive at the end of the day. And
Great mission for sure.
So my hat's off to you on behalf of the tech community. You are doing work that the work you do and the values that your company have are so closely aligned. And it's very admirable for you to be so candid with us. That's sort of what we care about here. And I appreciate you being so accessible and reacting to this quickly. I like having you in Pittsburgh because I know that you've been on the road so much.
I haven't been at Pittsburgh this much since the 90s. I've said. Nice
So
to see.
I can't thank you enough.
Thank
We'll stay in touch with you. I just want to remind everyone that you can tell others that we've recorded this. And for this week, we are continuing to do our daily calls. And right now we have U.S. Attorney Scott Brady joining us tomorrow. We have on Wednesday, County Executive Rich Fitzgerald. And we have Kelly Hunt, and a senior SBA specialist from Huntington Bank on Thursday. And we have many more people that are high profile, either running businesses or elected officials that are in our pipeline for later this week and beyond. We are working hard to make sure that our community stays connected, and today is an example. So I thank you, Justin McElhattan, for your leadership and your friendship and the work that you're doing around the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
You too.
See you all. Thank you. All right.
Okay, I think you just have